Today we are super excited because we have Mattias Nagér from Einride with us. He has been part in building a company up to around 500 people. So stay tuned for some good advice here. Mattias, super excited to have you on board. Welcome to the wrap.
Thank you. Super excited to be here.
Cool. Einride is something we've read about and heard about. So could you give us a bit of an intro to the company and what you're doing?
Sure. Einride is, we are 8 years old, based out of Sweden, but nowadays an international company. Work with, within the transport sector with capacity as a service based on our platform, the Saga platform. So aim of the company is to reduce CO2 emissions and of course reduce cost for our customers with shipper needs through our electrical vehicles and our autonomous vehicles.
Seems a bit sci-fi, to be honest.
Exactly. They're super cool and they are even more awesome looking at them, in real life. So like we of course have them as our strategic bet how to be competitive and in the long term as a provider within this space, because you need to be able to make the profession within operating a heavy duty vehicle to be more safe, and we can utilize drivers even more by working with autonomous solutions. But at the end of the day, we electrify the shipping for our customers.
Cool. Today's topic is building teams and ensuring great quality of hires. So I just wanted to understand also what the people function looked like when you joined Einride, and what was working well at that time and what was on your list of improvements.
When I joined, we were 20 people, so it was no people function. We had what we called an administrative manager, and that was a little bit of everything within finance, HR, and all of that. So when I joined, it was more or less an empty paper to start working in. Because when I started, our CEO told me the most important thing in your role going forward from now and onwards is, never create a process that stands in the way for the company's growth and business. And that is something I kept in mind. We don't grow the HR for HR's sake in any way. We need to solve a problem by doing it. So to start off, we kind of grew the team pretty slow. I started off after 6 to 9 months. So we had one HR generalist and one talent acquisition specialist, and we start growing it. And, building from bottom up with, HR system, recruitment system. We just had an Excel sheet and an inbox when I joined. Started up with, making sure that we had a decent, comp and ben philosophy with pensions and insurances and things like that. Started off briefly with looking at, how to create that performance culture and making sure that we, value that, building teams, culture, build that bottom up, but always from the business, and, the need from the business, never created because we get this kind of desire how we think that an HR function should looks like, or an HR team should looks like. Rather look at what problem are we solving. Are we increasing sales? Are we increasing churn? Or are we helping to speed up a product development? Or what are we helping by doing or implementing X, Y, or Z?
I think that's very fascinating, and something I think, or an approach I think like HR and the people function will have much, a seat at the grown-up table in a way, because what we're seeing is that HRs from time to time can become this sort of bubble that's created where they create processes and procedures, and where it's disconnect from the business. And having that sort of business first approach and seeing how can HR and the people function support that growth is definitely something that's interesting, and I assume then that's shaped your philosophy on how you build the whole setup.
100%. I very much dislike when talking about an HR agenda or an HR plan, because from my end it's just one part of the business plan, and there are companies with where the staff and the employees are more or less in the middle of everything. Some people have some more of a product focused, or like if it's a technical solution or whatever it can be, and some have more of a service where the employees are more in center. But at the end of the day, it's still employees that are building the company. And so from my end, I rather, talk about how do we increase sales and how can I help from an HR perspective to do so, rather than, looking at it as a process within HR that we think should be done. We need to start with, as I said, what part of the business plan are we enabling by doing something within HR? So like, let's rather talk about HR's part of the business plan than the HR agenda, because like that is, then you kind of start in the wrong way.
Makes sense. I assume you've then probably read the Netflix culture deck and like this inspiration from the US. A lot of these companies are advocating we're a team, not a family, in a way, which also plays a bit to this.
Yeah, I think so. And it's like, of course, it's hard to translate that straight into call it a Scandinavian legacy in one way, because it is different cultures, but you need to work towards that, to end up in the middle somewhere. You need to, aim for that, because otherwise you will end up in the wrong way on that scale.
Makes sense. Okay, so during this crazy growth, you joined when you were 20, now you're 500-ish.
Yep.
That obviously massive journey. Could you share some of those aha moments that you had during that growth journey?
Yeah, I have them every day. that is, being in this kind of environment, of course, both, inventing stuff, looking at, from not having an autonomous vehicle and suddenly we have an autonomous vehicle. That is an aha, just looking at that. So, just the sheer complexity of, building something that is at the same time some kind of SaaS company, and then you have a charging and infrastructure part, and then you are building, autonomous vehicle where you are inventing stuff, and then you're becoming an operations company in 8 countries simultaneously. The sheer complexity is most likely an aha moment for me, like how hard it is. Like, it is super hard. I think that there has been a little bit of, call it naivety, like how hard it is to actually build a company that becomes successful if you actually are aiming for the international top. Like that is super hard. But looking at maybe, on the HR and talent perspective, I would say that one thing that has kind of, I've been here for 6 years, and I think that this is something that has been increasingly over this year, and that is kind of that there is no line between the kind of, call it brand or reality, and the employer brand. That kind of, that you cannot build an image how it is, because everything has become so transparent. So the only thing you can do is to build a successful company, because people will know how it is, because they are looking at your people, they're talking to people, they have channels in. So you can never work with an employee brand. So that is something that, strikes me, that the transparency in kind of this kind of community that we are working, it's like you need to aim for the core stuff and actually change the company and like build it. And maybe some else aha could be that, I think that we have had 10 to 15 years in the world where this has been a very, high economy. So there's a lot of company that has scaled a lot. And I think that it's easy to, build a company on people that has the experience of scaling, but there's a lot of people also out there that has been in the right place at the right time. And it's easy to get, a little bit that you're flattered by good CVs, so to say, that when you're building it, you need to find a way. How do we separate the people that has been at the right companies in the right time from the people that had a real impact on that growth? Like that is something, and that is super tricky and super hard. But also not to, under evaluate people from like big corporation that has been a little bit of misfits, that like really struggled with big company culture, that really wants to have an impact, that struggles with a low pace or administration or what it could be. Those are the people you should aim for as well, because they come with so much domain competence and knowledge, and that might just haven't been kind of released in that way because they were blocked from the culture. So those, like, to not under evaluate people, because I think that there's been some time where you have a little bit of, you know, big company culture, and then you have the scale ups that has been in the world the 10 to 15 years. And I think that we can see right now that there's a little bit of consolidation going on, where, you know, you understand that, you know, we shouldn't over evaluate the kind of hyped backgrounds, and you shouldn't under evaluate the big corporation, because they obviously have done a lot right over the years.
Yeah. And you're based in Stockholm.
Yeah.
We also have operations all over the world. So just wondering how that sort of internationalization has impacted your recruitment efforts.
To start with, you know, we are Stockholm based, but we have a big part of us is in Gothenburg as well, and then we have it in I think it's 8 different countries now. I think that there's a few layers to that question. You know, first of all, you know, we are really trying to lead with commercial and operation in most countries, you know, and if it's not that high volume, we are really trying to do that from headquarters, or like from Stockholm or Gothenburg, and, you know, to do that locally. But the bigger you get, and the harder it is to find the kind of the sweet spot seniority or the sweet spot experience that you need to open up the talent pool. You know, you can't just go for one country. You can't go for Gothenburg or Stockholm or Germany or whatever it can be. You need to look from both North America and Scandinavia and continental Europe or whatever. And to find that setup, how do you do a search where the world is your market in that way? You need to find a way to have transatlantic teams, you know, where you have someone in the US working at the same kind of process as someone in Europe, that you need to almost internally find a setup that is similar to the big search companies out there that has international teams. Because when I use an executive search company, usually they have maybe 2 people in the US and 2 people in Europe, and they are forming one team to help us search both markets. And you can duplicate that. We can have a recruitment person in Austin, where we have our US office, or maybe in New York, to, you know, reduce time difference a little bit, and team up with someone in Sweden or continental Europe and work in the same way. Because otherwise, it usually, in an internal talent acquisition team, it's super easy to have them work in their project, and you don't team up as they do on the agency side. And I think that that was something that we started doing, that we teamed up on the more complex role and working, you know, cross-functional or cross-regional talent.
That's it's quite fascinating, trying to sort of replicate that model in a way.
Because I think that we are seeing, of course, that kind of move, that going from using agencies to forming internal recruitment team that is in one way, you know, having the same expertise as the kind of recruitment companies, but we haven't yet forming that kind of. A lot of them, I think, don't go all the way with, you know, doing researchers and then having, you know, consultants and so on and so on. And I'm not sure if we need to go that far, but I really think that the kind of company that we really need to see the kind of full talent pool. And it's hard for someone in Sweden to search in different continents. So we should definitely be able to team up, work in the same process, and you know, work as a team instead.
Did COVID change anything with regards to location? Spotify went quite liberal with their working from home philosophy. Are you more office based? What's your perspective?
We have from the start made a decision that, you know, it's super hard for a company like us to start talking about days, hours, or, you know, where you spend your time, because if we start, you know, we are an international company. Some people work around the clock. Some people need to go home and pick up kids and so on and so forth. Like, it's super hard to tell what kind of needs every people has. We really believe that people that work here are dedicated and they are putting all of their kind of energy into Einride. We used to say that, we think if you can meet your colleagues, it will always, happen something. We're building a company and a culture at the same time as we are solving engineering problems and customer problems. So we need to meet, but I cannot put myself in an individual shoes, what the kind of risky group they're in, or what kind of life they're facing in their life there are right there, and so on and so forth. So the base is that of course we should meet if we can meet, but we won't say that you're going to spend one day here or one day there. So I wouldn't say we're not a remote first, we are not a hybrid, we are not an office first kind of company. We just think that the individuals need to do the kind of assessment where they do their job best that day, and mostly that is in the office, because as I say, we can't build a culture if we don't meet and talk. That's at least my belief. You can mitigate that if you start with remote first from the beginning, but it's super hard when you're supposed to drive a truck or build a truck to be remote first.
That's understandable. No, but that is good. I think also what's interesting is try to get inside of your brain and understand, or take you back to 6 years back and see how that recruitment process and operations and infrastructure changed from the early days, moving from 20 to 500 employees. Then what did that hiring roadmap look like? What did the systems and tools look like, and the processes, and how did you sort of build step by step to the level you're at now?
First of all, when I started, we were not that known. A lot of people didn't know about us. So it was about finding people that was ready to take a bit of a risk and that had the right kind of competence. But it was a lot about finding candidates and having them attracted to the company. Somewhere when we started a little bit, become a bigger and stronger brand, and we did Series A funding and stuff like that, people started to, we could see a significant increase of interest of us. And me and our CEO had a chat, and he said, from now on, the main KPI from you is not saying yes and finding people. It's about saying no and, making sure that we don't scale in the wrong way. That is what it's going to become. And that is, 100% correct, because it's all about that to, risk minimize in that way, because there are so many people that are attracted to a company, given all of the macro trends of sustainability and automation and being a part of the kind of Stockholm startup scene and tech scene and so on. So a highly attractive kind of company. And then suddenly we can become in the kind of hyper growth mode where we're hundreds and hundreds of vacancies every year. So trying to just, manage that kind of volume. We have a super complex business. So we really think that cognitive tests is something that we use to scale, because it's a good way of risk minimize that we don't just trust the managers to do a good assessment. So just as a tool, we have, cognitive test has been super central. We started off with...
Do you want to give any shout outs to, is it Alva Labs?
Or we have used Alva Labs from start. So and they have been a super good partner for us. So that is something. And that's interesting because, scaling internationally using tests is a little bit more controversial, going into certain countries, US, for example, they are not equally used to using tests. So we have needed to, advocate for that quite a bit. But we have a strong belief that is how you scale, because otherwise, how do we make sure that everyone is assessing people at the same way? You can't be sure that you find a store just because they have score high, but at least, you make sure that you have a high lowest kind of bar.
Yes, higher talent density, and that's very much supported by research also.
Yeah,
That,
100%. Because you can never make sure that one person that score low or high, you can never assess if that person will make a good job based out of a cognitive test. But what is for sure is that the higher average you have in the company in terms of cognitive test, the more successful the company. That is just the most research area within HR. So that's just how it is.
Absolutely, and statistically, it's just sort of about reducing risk in a way and ensuring that you have.
So if it's something I want to say, about scaling and like hypergrowth, don't miss that, because that is, it's so easy to just getting swept away with that kind of pace that you're in. But if you stay true to that, some kind of lowest bar there, you risk minimize a lot. But we started off with, a Swedish ATS. So we didn't have one when I started. So that was one of the first thing I did to make sure that we, professionalized a little bit and streamlined the process a bit so that we get more control. So we used a more, back in the days when Team Taylor were a bit smaller. So we started up with them. But then when we grew more international and scaled more, we kind of needed someone that might, because US is very complex also when it comes to what kind of data and, the difference, you have the GDPR here in Europe that we struggle with, and they have their kind of challenges. So we thought that looking at a supplier with a little bit more US experience. So we went for, so now we're using Lever instead. And we are like working out good because you need that kind of global supplier.
And if you look at other parts of what I could categorize as a recruitment operation, the topic of today is the hiring bar, right? So there's a lot of stuff you need to do to ensure that hiring bar. So how did you manage to just instill that this is the level that we were operating on?
Yeah, I think one thing to start with before talking about, how we educate and stuff like that is kind of what mandate do you give to talent acquisition? Because my firm belief is that it's more easy to make sure that you have a high bar of what goods looks like, or bar of excellence, or whatever you want to call it, if you give a high mandate to the talent acquisition specialist. You hire people with high domain knowledge and with high integrity, and that are like independent and senior enough to have the conversation with the hiring manager, and always have the right to, to have their veto. Because if a hiring manager at Einride says yes, but the talent acquisition specialist says no, this person doesn't have what it takes, or are too expensive because we can have the same kind of quality for a lower price, or whatever it can be, it will always be a no, because they are supposed to be the specialist in doing that. Because otherwise you need to educate the bar of excellence to like 100 managers instead of doing it with 8 or 10 talent acquisition specialists. So like, I think that, where you have that mandate, so we just don't become a service institution for the managers and they are supposed to stand there with all of the choices. I don't think that is the most easy way to scale and keep a high kind of quality of candidates. So that is one thing. And then I have actively not work with a KPI for, successful placement or recruitment. Because from my end, if someone comes to me and say that I had 5 recruitments and I placed all of them, or if someone comes to me, I had 5 of them, I recruited 1, 2 of them I declined because they weren't good enough, 1 were too expensive, and the other one I had spent, my time looking and I just can't nail it. I need to have more time. For me, that is a better, result, because they know what good looks like and we are still going for it. It's worse for the company to do wrong recruitment than no recruitment, because then we're scaling it. Someone that hasn't the right level of quality will both not do enough of a good job to be at international level, disrupting, inventing and stuff like that, but most likely someone else in the company needs to also mitigate for, or compensate for that. So then I rather have 4 more weeks in that recruitment than just taking what we can get. So I don't like to talk too much about those kind of KPIs because it's hard to do negative KPIs. That doesn't drive the right behavior either. But I just don't want to create the wrong incentives there for my team.
I think that's a very interesting perspective, especially coming from a scale up, because it seems to be a lot of like blitz scaling with rushed hiring, cost per hire, time to hire, all of these more traditional metrics. How was it communicating that internally when you have line managers being impatient, when you have, I don't know, the executive team being impatient, we're not growing our team fast enough. So how did you manage to stand your ground and advocate that hiring bar? Was that easy, or were everybody aligned?
Do you think it was easy? No, I would say no, of course, but like from I think that this has to do a lot, what kind of cultures you set from the start, because everyone that works here knows that, what we do is super hard, if not almost impossible, because otherwise someone else would already have done this. So you need that kind of, everyone knows that, you need that kind of international top quality in everything we do. And I think everyone wants that same level when you have a workshop, and you need that quality on the other side of the table. So we have that kind of culture built in a little bit. But I also think, I think that it's super important that you involve some HR with, some, that is experience within recruitment, talent in that kind of context early. It's not all companies that are hiring a pretty senior HR expert already when they are 20 people. A lot of them have that in some kind of COO or founder or someone that does that until it's too painful or when they don't have time doing it. But here it was a strategic choice that let's scale it the right way from the start. And that, if you start in that way, where is the mandate? How do you build that kind of process around a certain decision change? Then you're kind of almost, you have that built into the system. If you start that from scratch, you don't need to change anything. That's just how it is and has been from the start.
What you mentioned about like empowering and giving mandate to the TA team versus hundreds of managers. I think that's extremely fascinating, because it sort of makes perfect sense, because you can't align the hiring bar across 100 people. You can of course give some indications and whatnot, but having that core team of TA people with the mandate and with the veto, it makes perfect sense. I think that's
I just want to take, of course, and you need to have super talented managers. They do a lot of the recruitment. Of course, they need to say yes. If they say no, we of course don't hire that person, and we need to have them on board and so on. The best way to do it is as a team. But I do expect, and keeping everyone in the recruitment team accountable for every recruitment we do. That is super important, because they have the choice to say no. And if they say no, it's going to be a no. And they need to know that it's not the manager's accountability, what they hire. It is their talent acquisition's accountability as well, because they have always the choice to say no to someone.
We mentioned metrics. I assume you're also gathering data, not necessarily the time to hire, cost per hire stuff that we talked about, but maybe other types of data, candidate NPS scores or other areas. Have you an example where you tried to, or you looked at the data and said, okay, we're facing this and this challenge, and then you fixed it, you went back and measured again? Any takeaways there for people?
I think it's a bit hard. The metrics that we are trying to mitigate a lot from is, the hiring managers. We are doing a lot of because they are our key stakeholders. We are of course, doing service and having our internal KPIs. It's not an NPS score. We can't ask them if they would recommend us to someone else, but they are. I hope that we don't have too many detractors. But I do think that there we can do a lot. With the insights we get, it is hard to do it with candidates, because it's always Either they are getting the survey under the process, or they have just failed the process, or they have just nailed the process. So we are doing it, but it's super hard to take too much action on. So, you need to have almost a more qualitative approach to that, to talk to people, to understand people. It's something we can do better, but to do it more hardcore coded in terms of KPIs. It might be that I'm going to be convinced in some other way going forward when we're becoming even bigger and more kind of even more mature. But right now, I think that it's problematic. It is a problematic KPIs looking at surveys to candidates.
I think it's an interesting perspective. And I think, I don't know, that there are, looking at your approach to the metrics, I think it's a different way of looking at it. And I think that's interesting and cool. I think what I'm trying to understand is what do you view as success? Can you look at one specific number, or is it more a feeling of, okay, we've hired all of these people, the general feeling is good? Like how can you sort of measure quarter on quarter or year by year? Is that difficult in a more qualitative approach to it?
It is difficult because I think that, it's giving my philosophy in this. It is hard to find that sweet spot KPI, how to track it. You can look at it in like two ways. Of course, at the end of the day, the success of the company, that is, it's the employees. If we have obviously done something wrong if we don't succeed, and we have done something right if it is successful. But it's hard to, that is super hard to do something, with. But I do think that the eNPS, so like having people that work with the right competence at the right kind of company, that is not only a talent acquisition matrix, but the absolute an HR perspective. Because if you hire people, they are onboarded in the right way, they are treated in the right way with the right prerequisite for success, and you give the hiring managers the right tools to be a good manager, then you're going to get high eNPS. At least, at the end of the day, in some way. Then there's other factors that can play in. But I think that the recruitment process in one way doesn't stop just when they sign, because, in one way you need to include that you have a probation period, you have an onboarding, you need to get that, it is some kind of gray zone in that way, to not only have a KPI that is talent acquisition focused, it is actually the full HR unit. And I think that eNPS is probably the best one you can use for actually understanding that we have done something good, or if we have a problem somewhere in the chain. And then you just need to start to look at maybe comments or drivers and stuff in that kind of engagement survey that you do.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think also one thing that's maybe relevant is also looking at the process and look at like metrics such as interview per hire in a way. Are we wasting time? Top of funnel, are we not good enough at screening candidates so that we're wasting our hiring manager's time? Or, I don't know, post-hire also doing a quality of hire survey. I think Team Taylor has just launched that. I'm not paid by Team Taylor, but I think that's also an interesting.
But they can use a certain code when they write the contract.
We'll add the discount code in the description. No, but I think definitely that the quality of hire that resonates well with what you mentioned about the hiring bar. So understanding if we're maintaining that, if hiring managers are happy with the hire and the quality that we bring into the company. You mentioned previously that you went through massive growth. This last year or so has been a bit slower, as with the macro. It's been not blitzscaling and hyper growth. So how does that impact the TA team? How do you transition and focus differently when hiring, and how do you keep people busy?
We had absolutely, and valid. We went from hyper growth into more of a flat kind of growth, and that also giving that the people are leaving and stuff like that. So you never stand exactly still. we had a business model where we used an embedded recruitment team, which in that case was pretty good for us because we could still keep a core team, but anyway scale down, so we didn't need that kind of full kind of volume. So we could keep the core team that we had within Einride with that setup, and then you need to go down again to how do we because you always need to bet on, okay, that kind of growth is going to kick back again. So you need, you can start learning from what you did, because, 2 years of hyper growth, then you need to breathe, you need to understand, you need to learn, and then you can tweak. We choose to change our ATS. So we started to educate, managers, what have we tweaked? We started to do that. You can go down into detail about, okay, what kind of international setup will we have? How do we make sure that if we, instead of having 16 ongoing, processes per recruiter, if we go down to 8, damn it, how much quality can we spend in finding exactly the right candidate? Can we raise the bar of excellence? Yeah. Should we, tweak that a bit so that we even more increase? Because the next step of Einride is not going to be easier. It's just becoming more and more complex. The bigger you get, the more operations you get, the more tech you're going to build and all of that. It's just becoming harder and harder and harder. So we talked about that average, both in cognitive, but also in what kind of experience people need. It's going to get harder. So you need to spend more time finding that talent. So for us, it has resonated a lot where we are as a company, because if the company need to, call it mature or professionalize and going into the next phase, that goes for us as well, because we need to learn from what we did and take the next step as an HR and as a talent acquisition team as well. So I think, don't be afraid of taking that time a little bit to, starting investing even more time per project and, making sure that you learn from what you have done and use that time to do the changes that is needed.
Yeah. For people to get an idea of your current TA function, what does that look like now in terms of headcount and split of responsibilities?
Right now we have 5 talent acquisition where we have 100% executive focused. We have 2 more generic and 2 more tech focused. Looking at also talking about learning from before. We are also looking at taking on, a little bit more of HR students or someone else, kind of people that want to come into the talent acquisition industry to, team up with a few students so that we have a good kind of succession planning that might have 1 year from their exams and can come in and have a running start in a year or so that they can learn the industry, learn the business, learn the profession from our team and then do so.
You mentioned a couple of things with regards to the hiring bar, and jumping a bit back and forth here because there are so many areas to. You mentioned the cognitive test being one. Okay, this is something I would like to recommend to everyone, and also the veto system where you have TAs being highly involved. Are there any other stuff that you're doing to ensure that hiring bar? I think those are really concrete.
Yeah, absolutely. So, really good. So what we do is, you always need that kind of functional interview, independent if it's commercial, you might need a customer case to look at together with some person from the commercial team. If it's in tech, we always do, preparation when it comes to a code test, and then you do 2 hours of pair programming with someone from the tech team, because one thing is of course to, as I say, to reduce risk and have the cognitive test early. But then, of course, you need to be it doesn't matter if you're super intelligent. If you're supposed to write code and you can't write code, then that's going to be a problem. So, that is just more of a generic, making sure that people can handle the complex environment they are entering, but then you of course need to be super good at the functional stuff that you are going to work with. So that is the next important step. I think those are the main parts, and of course the cultural stuff, we're working with the team. But I would say to kind of nail the functional stuff, but making sure that you are using the cognitive test in the right way, because I think that a lot of people are using them a little bit like an alibi late in the process that you're okay. Now we have two last candidates, and then we are doing the tests. I rather make it to keep it as neutral and clean as possible. You need it as early as possible. Use it for what it is. Make sure that you don't look at a super interesting CV and you meet them and you just like them instantly, and then you have to take make the choice if you're going to read the test correct or not. If they fail the test, then you need to take a decision if you're going to choose your gut feeling and the CV quality or the test result. But if you make the test before you even have seen them or met them or looked at it, then it actually can be that kind of risk reducer that it's supposed to be. So you need to use it as early as possible. That is what I also want to give as a recommendation. If you're going to use it early.
Yeah. And if it's non-negotiable or cut off or cap or whatever, then obviously you're wasting time.
Respect everyone's time. Yeah. 100%.
You should definitely front load that in the process. I think
and if it's high, if it's a high volume recruitment, like, we have, I don't know, if we have 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 applicants for our summer internships and stuff like that, we do it, as the first step, because that just, you can actually calculate just how much time and how much money you save on doing that, just because using that as the first kind of way of selecting candidates.
Have you faced any challenges with introducing this step with senior candidates? I don't know, let's say you're a VP of something, you have 20 years of experience, and then applying for Einride, and then, okay, I need to do this test, look at my CV, like people that are more high maintenance in the process. Are you evangelistic about it? Does it apply to all positions, or are you a bit more pragmatic?
I would say even more. Like from my end, it actually goes, and this is also something, it just feels like I'm, turning stuff around here. But from my end, it's the same thing with probation period that I'm very strict on. I would like, the higher the salary, the more complex and bigger the scope, the bigger the accountability, the more risk we are taking by, taking this away. So we are having higher demands on the result of the test. And I am more strict in not taking away the probation period if they are senior enough. Because if they have that kind of level of role in them, that is even more non-negotiable for me. Of course, there are steps where we need, if there's someone that comes from 25 years of employment somewhere, the probation period might be something, but usually that's super strict as well.
Good.
But that goes also, there's a lot of things there that I think, people are reading in the kind of wrong kind of way. That is one, that just because they're senior and have a high level of that, like, as I say, the more important it is, but also that kind of, when there's someone that comes and recommend someone from the network, people has also that kind of, but they don't need that. I worked with that person in 2 years. Okay. But that, that is your judgment. It's just, then you need to have the skill to translate that environment to this environment, have you been here, and are you doing a great job, and so on. So I also am very strict in, your network and your referrals. That is a source of talent, but it's not quality assurance of talent. So they are straight into the test and stuff like that as well. And I love when we get that referrals, but that is not a quality assurance in itself.
Good. I love the fairness of this. I think that it makes perfect sense. That's resonating with my recruiter heart.
Yeah, that's good. That's
or
good.
Brain. I don't know. Better to say brain. Sound more objective in a way. You've gone through, again, massive growth, more stable growth. So how, from a leader perspective, how do you keep your TA team engaged, and then like how do you create that momentum? Because hyper growth is a bit honeymoon period feeling, and then it slows down. So what was your approach to that to keep the team happy and engaged?
I hope that we actually did. It's all about, coming together and look at the next step. It's almost like work with HR, going into hypergrowth or maybe staying flat or actually shrinking the business. All of that has just different parts of your toolbox you need to use. In the same way as, if you're in hypergrowth, a talent acquisition specialist, are just running and trying to keep up. And then suddenly to get some air and breathe and actually starting to, learn from that and start maybe, working with projects, as I said, educating managers, replacing systems, doing stuff to increase and, to do stuff better and maybe have some time to rather, spend that extra hour on a search and stuff like that. Usually people are actually maybe liking that and having that kind of variance, like in the same way in a talent acquisition specialist life, that kind of different phases in a company. It just comes with different challenges. It's not always a good thing for a talent acquisition specialist to have a lot of stuff to do when it comes to pure volume, because, as I said, volume is not all. You need that quality, and to have quality, you need prerequisites, and to have, you need to have tools. You need to have all of that. And to find that time in a hyper-growth context, it is super tricky. As you say, when those managers are standing there and screaming about their kind of, about their needs, to say that, yeah, but I'm going to, look in and do a pre-study on a new tool, like, usually you can't say that. But if you find the time, so I think that, take a step back and look what can we do here and now. Then, of course, you need to be honest to each other. It now might be still a tough time, independent if you need to have a colleague leave because we don't have enough volume, or if that embedded team needs to leave that you haven't worked with for 12 months. So fully respect for that people might struggle in the transition from one phase to another. But I definitely think that you can find the motivation. It's just a change of what task and what problems you are there to solve.
Because you've obviously been successful in what you've done, so I assume people out there are maybe wondering if you have any under the radar tactics, any secret sauce there. You shared a lot of insights, but anything we've missed, anything you haven't talked about?
Nah, I'm not too much of that under the radar stuff. I rather say it out loud.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, but like I would say that, because what I haven't, I hope that maybe not all the hiring managers will listen to this, because I'm not sure if they have realized about that, what I'm saying, that kind of veto or the ultimate mandate that someone within talent acquisition has the kind of okay to say no or yes to a recruitment. It's just built in the process from the start that, we are the experts of what we do. And I think that is something that, if I hadn't said it before, that is my, I would say, best recommendation to actually, maybe, slip it, into the process, because it helps a lot. And I think that it's something that you just need to do, and it requires the right people. You cannot have that veto or that process, outspoken in any way if you don't have the right talent acquisition team. They need to be under the same requirement when it comes to the cognitive test. They need to understand if you're supposed to do the kind of solution, logistic and transport kind of recruitment, you need to know, recruitment. And just as an example, our specialists on hiring supply chain and transport and commercial expertise, he was so good at that, so that the commercial team hired him, and now he's a core player in our commercial team selling, our solution to our customers, because he was so good at that domain. And that is the level you need to have. Our tech recruitment, he was super good at, he built his own computers and were really, really techy. You need them to be able to talk in the same kind of language, because otherwise you can't have a reactive kind of talent acquisition team on the right level and expect them to have that mandate. Then it's going to be super devastating, because you need to start with a team, have the right level, and making sure that they are well equipped to actually have that mandate. That is something that is super important. So don't be too cheap and go to kind of, so you don't become just a service provider if you want to build that kind of independent and kind of high level talent acquisition team.
What are 3 things that you wouldn't do again? We talked about a lot of stuff that makes sense, and that's a really good tip for people out there. So what are the, I don't know if we have a sensory or beeping here, but what are the fuck ups?
It was, you are the host, you're allowed. I will try not to use it. I think that don't get swept away in the hyper growth. It costs a lot to scale in the wrong kind of way. So, from time to time, if I would do something all over again, maybe to be even more, pulsate a little bit the kind of growth when it comes to pure staff, not the company, but, take a month where you actually deliberate might push a few recruitments and making sure that, okay, but is the team formed in the right way? Are we looking at this? Is this valid? Is this actually, should we throw more headcounts on this problem, or is this a structural problem? Making sure that you're actually thinking about this stuff. So maybe, own that speed a little bit and just don't get swept away. I also think to not become emotional attached too much. There's a lot of people in this kind of journey. When you're 20 people, everyone in the same room, everyone is doing everything. But not everyone has the right toolbox to both start, scale, and professionalize a company. A lot of people are good in 1 or 2 of those phases. So, you need to dare to not be too emotional and have a conversation with people that are they the right person for that task at that moment? Because you are building relationships. People are people, and you work super intense with people. And also, you have been talking a little bit about it or asked questions about it, but do not underestimate the complexity to go from a national organization to an international organization, and the kind of importance of a strong company culture and, values that you can rely and fall back on. I think that is like super important, because it's easy to kind of stay in that kind of transition from being a Swedish company with international flavors and transitioning that to a global company founded in Sweden. That is a tricky morph to do.
Makes perfect sense. And I think, own the pace, don't be too emotional, and don't underestimate global growth. There are 3 really interesting areas there. Cool. Last question is just, what are the problems that you're facing now? What's the plan moving forward for the TA team or the people team at Einride?
I think that one thing was that we just mentioned, to become a truly global or HR function as well. To actually, because it's super hard to scale that with local knowledge, going into the UAE, scaling in the US, continental Europe, to have the right prerequisite at every given moment. It's easy to become a little bit reactive and not proactive when it comes to that. It maybe comes on the nature of growing, but that is, taking the next step in that kind of globalization. But I think I would almost say a little bit of taking one step back, that, to keep scaling, keep growing, but not lose the agility, because, we are one of the functions that is supposed to be, the core and the backbone of the organization, but we need to allow that kind of agility, scale up culture, because as soon as we become too big, too corporate, too big of a corporation, we lose the advantage we have, that we don't have a legacy. And I think that it's super important that we never build stuff just for the sake of it, that we kind of keep that agility. I think that is the most important, to ask ourselves all the time, do we need this? Do we need this in this size, with this complexity, with this, or are we just adding stuff that we don't need? I think that is a lot of the stuff we do need, but we always need to ask ourselves this: why are we doing this? Are we focusing on the right thing? So we just don't become too introvert in how we look at our kind of task and assignments.
Mattias, great closing comments. Really appreciate the conversation. Thank you so much for spending some time and sharing your insights. Thank you for listening. Remember to like and subscribe. We're coming out with a new episode every single month.